What do you think of the realities of economy in this country right now?
China puts their 5-year plan out, and so we can know what are China's plans. It's very important for the world to plan what China will do.
Madam SG, what a pleasure to see you in Beijing.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Last time we talked, it was in the heat of the tariff war. As the SG of UNCTAD, what do you think have been the impact of the so-called tariff war and where the world is going from now?
It's a wonderful question. But let me first say, the worst case scenario that we were afraid of did not happen. That was an open trade war. Especially because US and China are having conversations. And that is the most important stabilizing factor on the present framework of disruptions in trade. No doubt, trade has been disrupted. But if you will look at the numbers, trade has been growing this year 4%. Mm-hmm. It's much more than we expected. It's true that there is a little bit of front loading. Many of the traders, front load their imports or exports, waiting for the tariffs. But even if you take that away, trade would be growing this year 2.5%, 3%. So the question really is why? And I have to say, trade has been more resilient than we expected.
There's a logic about trade that not politics can bend.
Exactly, it's true. Because trade tries to find their ways. And they are structural factors also. First of all, South-South trade has been very dynamic. So in a way, there is a world out there that is growing, that is emerging, and that is really contributing to growth and trade in the global economy. And that world is the Global South. Yes. And the Global South today accounts for 40% of total trade.
First time ever in history.
First time ever in history, especially South-South trade. But if you sum South-South trade plus total trade coming from the South, they represent already 40% of total trade.
We have seen some national security strategies from one country or another talking about, emerging economies and developing countries likely to be the battleground, so to speak, for trade and economic competition. Do you see that is really likely to happen?
Yeah, I still think, I have to say, that the world is very interdependent. And you can see that in our last Trade and Development Report that we just launched. You can see, when you look at trade, that the hubs of trade in the South have doubled from before. That means that trade has been diversified, that production has disconcentrated, that there has been more inclusivity in bringing more actors and more countries into trade. So I think that this concentration is part of the resilience of trade, as I said before. And I think also that you can see that multipolarity in trade holds the promise of inclusion. But what I say, maybe with this I end, multipolarity with multilateralism will bring inclusivity. Multipolarity without multilateralism can bring us fragmentation. And that's what we need to avoid.
Well said. But what is likely to be the role of the Global South when it comes to global trade, particularly right now when we still see a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of geopolitics and geo-economic competition?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I would say that geopolitics has taken away a lot of the independent space of geoeconomics. So geopolitics and geoeconomics now are
ever more intertwined.
Much more intertwined. It's true, but the Global South has an important voice in WTO. So if we believe in a rules-based trade system, and if we believe that many of our countries, small and medium-sized countries, we need the framework to be able to thrive, because we cannot play the game of the big. We need a rules-based trade for predictability and for our economies to function.
But the question is, how strong will that voice be in terms of vis-a-vis the power of the big power, so to speak?
It's true, but in this case, I think, you never value what you have until you lose it.
Indeed.
And I think, in a way, that countries now defend WTO because they don't want to lose it. Now, WTO has to reform. And I think that the voice of Ngozi calling for reform in WTO is a very important one, and that going to the ministerial, we have to take reform seriously. We have to reform, but we need to know that we need to reform to strengthen the trade system, not to weaken it.
Indeed. And as one of the leading economies in the world, China is going to unveil its 15th five-year plan the coming year. Of course, some of the outlines are already known to the rest of the world. It's black and white, very clear. So what do you think of the realities of economy in this country right now? And how much will 15th five-year plan be able to provide opportunities for others and for China as well?
First of all, let me say that it's very important that China puts their five-year plan out. And so we can know what are China's plans.
Totally transparent.
Totally transparent, because it's very important for the world to plan what China will do, because China is the second most important economy of the world. And so in that sense, first of all, it's welcome. And the second thing for me that is welcome is that you have a long-term view. In a world of short-termism, it's very refreshing to understand what is the vision for a country like China.
So what did you see in that plan?
I saw several things. First of all, the continued emphasis on quality productive forces. The bet for innovation, for technology, and for productivity growth. Very important for China. Then I see also the emphasis on consumption and quality consumption to improve the well-being of the households and the communities. And I think that this is very important because obviously consumption in China will impact the whole world. And so I was very pleased when the Premier, in the meeting on the Premier Plus 10, the economic organizations, was saying that, and was also supporting, for example, the plan of Africa export to China. And to improve consumption in China, also imports have to improve, and then the balancing is better, and to support the Global South. China did three things. First of all, it took to zero the tariff in the least developed countries. Then it expanded it to all the African countries with whom China has diplomatic relations, that is 53 countries. And third, the export to China program. So I am very happy that UNCTAD will be supporting these efforts, and the announcement of China has been really very important for all the vulnerable countries.
I'm so glad you have a lot of takeaways out of the meeting, but there were a lot of talks about so-called oversupply, under consumption, and structural, whether there's going to be a real potential reform for China. What do you make of these buzzwords, and whether the plan will be implemented coming from your takeaways with the meeting of the premier, and also your many reality checks on the economy here?
No, I really liked a lot what I heard and what I read. Especially because, China has a superavit in goods, on trade, a surplus in trade, but it has a deficit in services. And a lot of the growing or in the consumption side will be also services. Because, at this level of development that China has, what people is asking is quality services. So they are thinking about health, they are thinking about their retirement, they are thinking about financialization. So services will play a very important role in the balancing act internally in China for, fostering demand, internal demand, but also in terms of the asymmetries or imbalances that you find in the global economy.
Now, meanwhile, how will China work with others? Because right now, China is strong in innovation. China is really an export power. Meanwhile, there's China's big market. A lot of people want to explore as well. But what is the best model as things evolving, as China grow? What is the best model of cooperation with other economies? That becomes a very thought-provoking and intellectual question, isn't it?
You are very right. Well, first of all, China is betting on international cooperation. The Global Development Initiative, the Global Governance Initiative, from our point of view, are very important, and they are very well placed in the moment that we are today. So the betting of China in the multilateral system, but also in assuming more responsibilities as a big economy, is very important. And it changes the dynamic, yes. But the other thing, is regional integration, trade agreements, because part of what we are seeing in the trade system is that 72% of trade still happens within WTO rules. Why? Because we have trade agreements, because we have regional agreements, because we have grouping agreements, and China is part of many of them.
Yeah, and indeed, recently China has decided to give up some of the earlier advantages in trading as a developing country to showcase its support for the global south and the global trading system.
Yeah, the announcement that was done last year, that China won't use the special and differential treatment in the rules of the WTO, was a very important point and a very important step to allow for better negotiations inside WTO.
Madam SG, I remember very well in some of the interviews you are suggesting we need to look at the evidence in order to give analysis. And obviously you have been showing the evidence strongly, but the question really is whether many of the others in the world, would they be able to have access to evidence, be able to see this evidence and come to terms with this evidence of how the world has been changing? For example, about China and China's role with the rest of the world.
One of the things when I came to the UN Trade and Development Organization, I said, we have such a wealth of analysis and information in the organization. How do we make it get to all the people? Because if we do reports of 200 pages, it won't happen, yes? And we started to put a lot of graphic, easy to understand evidence out there. I think that is part of our mandate, part of our contribution to the world. And we have the ones that have said, well, look, today the economy is different from before. Yes. 40% of GDP is global south, 40% of trade is global south, 50% of foreign direct investment originates in the south. So obviously the south is now a very important force of the global economy, and we have to listen more, to include more, and to empower the voices of the south if we want a multilateral system that will respond to the realities of today.
But the question is, Madam SG, is it lack of access to information, or is it reluctant to change the earlier perceptions, so to speak?
We live in a world of transition, and in the transitions, contradictory forces coexist. And
For example?
well, for example, you have multipolarity in the production and the trade in the global economy, but you have concentration in the monetary system. Yes? For example, these are two different parts of the global economy that coexist, and they depend from each other, but they not necessarily go in the same direction. Or, for example, the multilateral system. You know, you hear, and there is truth in the when they say the multilateral system is weaker today. We have lost part of the trust that, you know, the world had in the multilateral system. Yes, it's true, and we have to respond to that. At the same time, you go to the gatherings of the UN, the General Assembly, for example, and we had this year as much participation in the General Assembly as we had in the pre-COVID times. So we recover. So there is the need for the spaces for dialogue, for cooperation, for understanding each other, and at the same time, there is more skepticism on the solutions. And so we have to decide, each of us, what are we going to push for?
What do we choose together?
Exactly, what we do. You know, when you think that everything goes in the bad direction and in the same direction, you don't mobilize to change the world. I still think that the world can improve and that the multilateral system can be part of that improvement if we reform.
Multilateralism certainly is the key for United Nations system. This year, 80th anniversary of the United Nations. But many question how much reform is really needed. You said earlier, to be a multilateralist needs to be a reformist. Yes. I remembered. Yes. So what does that mean to be a reformist, especially of the UN system?
Well, first of all, we don't have to be defensive. We have to embrace reform. The UN, the world is different than in 1945. For the reasons I already said, we have more actors. You know, how many countries were in the UN when the UN was established?
It was 1/3 of the current
50.
number. Yeah.
50 countries. Today we are 193. So there were 143 countries that did not determine how the UN was going to function. So let's understand that the world is different. Second, and this is a good reason for change, there are much more capacities today in the countries, in the regional organizations, in the population. The population has more education. Today, there are more capacities inside the government. So the UN has to change for partnering with much more. We don't have to do everything. We have to partner also with the capacities, the organizations, the knowledge that is also outside the UN. In 1945, probably the UN had most of the knowledge and the capacities in the UN. Today, the UN is unique, but we are not alone. We have to partner, to network, and to harness so much out there that can help to face the challenges in the world today.
What is going to be the role of multilateralism from now on when we see more fragmentations apparently?
There is a phrase from Dag Hammarskjöld that everybody uses, but it's very well said. He said the UN is created not to take us to paradise, but to save us from the inferno. And
well said.
It's very well said. We don't have to put as a priority or to do everything that is needed under the sun.
Indeed.
We have to be focused.
Prioritize.
We have to prioritize. And we have to be where we are unique. in peace and security, development, and human rights, that are the three pillars in Article 1 of the UN Charter. This continues to be the pillars of the UN. So let's devote our efforts to the priorities in which nobody can substitute us. And let's partner with the rest of the world institutions and capacities that can take care also of the rest.
You are well known for the positive energy. You're well known for seeking solutions while working with your partners around the world. I understand you also put yourself out there in this difficult time to work for a candidacy of the United Nations Secretary-General. Why would you do that when it is the most difficult time?
I am a product of the UN.
True.
I have had a better life because the multilateral system was there, because the multilateral system was a voice for progress, for prosperity, for less poverty, for better health for mothers and children. And I am a product of that. My family is a product. We live today better, and we have better lives because the multilateral system was there. So I have the responsibility to give back, because I believe that the multilateral system has to change, but it's indispensable. And probably I feel that I know the UN enough to defend it and to reform it.
Well said. We understand China has put forward earlier, as you suggested, the Global Governance Initiative. How much do you see a voice coming from the Global South at this critical moment will be able to rally the crowd to work with partners for the better of the United Nations and global governance?
The South is a very diverse,
Indeed,
and
and fluid also. And fluid,
exactly. And probably also within the South are different voices. But I think that with respect to the objectives in public goods, in the public goods that the world needs, and that can only be delivered in a collective action, the South will be united. And what we need is the right leadership to unite the South, to allow for the dialogue, and also to allow for the bridges that we have to build with the universal membership of the UN. Because it's not only about talking between ourselves, yes? It's about convincing the rest. It's about understanding the other side. I think that there is enough knowledge and commitment in the South to do that.
And also as a woman, you yourself is putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
You said famously, it is time for a woman to step up, to be sitting in that seat and work as the Secretary General. How would you reflect upon that moment of women, becoming ever more equal? And also, what does that mean for the world?
First of all, let me say that I know probably all the women that have been mentioned as possible candidates for the Secretary General post. And I can tell you that all of them, including me, we have the merits and the curriculum and the experience to be considered. We don't need a favor. We can compete on the basis of merit.
You are equally competing.
Exactly. What we need is no discrimination. What we are asking is not discrimination. If we will have a process that will be fair, in equal terms, based on merit, we will make it.
Madam SG, it has always been a pleasure to talking to you and also to learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.